Alrighty, so here's the first worksheet that you have on compositions of transformations. So when we are composing transformations, it just means we're going to do more than one transformation. We could translate, we could rotate, we could reflect, and we could dilate. We could do any combination of those things in any order. So looking at number 1, first we're going to translate our image, and then we're going to reflect it. So start off here, I just gave my coordinates for A, B, C, and D on the trapezoid pictured below, so pause for a moment and copy down these coordinates. To find A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime, I am going to use this coordinate notation here for translating the image, and again, I have x plus 2, so my image is going to go right 2, and y minus 1, so it's going to go down 1. So whenever I write my new coordinates, I have A prime will be at negative 8 plus 2, which is negative 6, and 5 minus 1, which is 4. B prime will be at 0 plus 2, which is 2, and 5 minus 1, which is 4. C prime will be at negative 2 plus 2, which is 0, and 2 minus 1, which is 1. And D prime will be at negative 6 plus 2, which is negative 4, and 2 minus 1, which is just 1. So when I graph my translated image, I'm going to go negative 6, 4 is my A prime, 2, 4 is my B prime, 0, 1 is my C prime, and negative 4, 1 is D prime. So here is my translated image. You can see that all I've done is shifted the image down and to the right. So next, what I'm going to do second is I'm going to reflect this image over the x-axis. Now, whenever we reflect something over the x-axis, we change our coordinate from x comma y to x negative y, meaning all we're going to do is switch the sign of our y from positive to negative or negative to positive. And when I do this, I am looking at my prime coordinates. I am looking at this A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime. That is what I am changing. That's what I am reflecting. So to go from A prime, which is negative 6, 4, my new coordinate, which I'm going to call A double prime or A2, with a little 2 up above, A2 is going to be at negative 6, negative 4. I switch the sign of my y. B2, I'm going to go from 2, 4 to 2, negative 4, switch the sign of my y. C2, I'm going to go from 0, 1 to 0, negative 1, switch the sign of my y. And D2 is going to be negative 4, negative 1. So all I did here was flip the sign of my y value. So let's look at this one on the graph. When I graph A2, I'm at negative 6, negative 4. And again, label your points A with a little 2 above it. B2 is at 2, negative 4. C2 is at 0, negative 1. And D2 is at negative 4, negative 1. So here is my now reflected image of my trapezoid. I've reflected it over the x-axis here. Alright, so we have just composed or done a composition of transformations on this trapezoid. Now, look at number 2. Number 2, first we're going to reflect over the x-axis and then translate. We're doing the same two things, but we're going to switch up the order and see what happens. So again, I've given the coordinates for A, B, C, and D. Pause for a second and copy those down. And now, first I'm going to reflect over the x-axis. So the first thing I'm going to do here is flip the sign of my y value. So I'm going to go from x comma to y to x comma negative y. Whatever y was, I'm going to switch up the sign. So my a prime is going to be negative 8, negative 5. B prime is going to be at 0, negative 5. I change the sign of my y, which is 5 here. C prime is going to be at negative 2, negative 2. And D prime will be at negative 6, negative 2. I just changed the sign of my y value. Let's graph this. A is at negative 8, negative 5. B is 0, negative 5. C is negative 2, negative 2. And D, negative 6, negative 2. And I'm going to label each of these A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime. So this is my reflected image. Alrighty, so now I'm going to translate this reflected image, what I have down here in the red, by going 2 to the right and down 1. I'm going to add 2 to my x, subtract 1 from my y. And again, I'm going to use what is now a prime, so negative 8, negative 5, and that is what I'm going to translate. That is what I'm going to shift, not the original image, but my red reflected image here. So from a prime to get to a2, or you can think of a1 to a2, I'm going to add 2 to my x, so negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6. Subtract 1 from my y. Negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6. B2, I'm going to take 0, negative 5, add 2 to my x, so my x is 2. Subtract 1 from y, so y is negative 6. C2, I have negative 2 plus 2 is 0. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. And D2, negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. Negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. So, put these on the graph. A2 is at negative 6, negative 6. B2 is at 2, negative 6. C2 is at 0, negative 3. And D2 is at negative 4, negative 3. So here in blue is my translated image. Okay, so first I reflected, then I translated, then I shifted. Now go back to the first graph. Does my second transformation here, look at A2, B2, C2, and D2, are they in the same place? You should notice that they're not. One is a little off from the other, where they're located on the graph. So, does the order matter whether we reflect first and translate second, or translate first and reflect second? Yes, it does. We get two different final results. So, what do you notice? The order does matter. So make sure the first transformation takes you from A to A prime. The second transformation takes you from A prime to A2. And if you were to do a third, you would go from A2 to A3. The order does matter. Alright, so you are responsible for the following two examples on the bottom of this worksheet and for the second worksheet.